All right. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. It's so good to see everybody in the chat already. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you for joining us all today for this very special Q&A with Tina Boogren. My name is Lauren and I am an editor here at Hawker Brownlow Education based in Melbourne. First, in the spirit of reconciliation, Hawker Brownlow Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, wherever we may be right now, and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. For those who aren't familiar with Hawker Brownlow Education, we empower F to 12 teachers and educational professionals with the tools, skills, books, and yes, webinars to help improve classroom performance and raise student achievement. And without further ado, let me introduce you to Tina Boogren. Dr Tina H Boogren is a fierce advocate for educators, particularly for their well-being. She is the author of numerous books centered around her passion areas of quality instruction, coaching, mentoring, and wellness, and hosts the weekly podcast, Self-Care for Educators with Dr Tina H Boogren. We were lucky enough to have Tina for 2 webinars last year on self-care for educators in the time of COVID-19 and motivating students in the time of COVID-19. Her titles you may be most familiar with include 180 Days of Self-Care for Busy Educators, Take Time for You, and the perennial bestseller, The Beginning Teacher's Field Guide. Tina, welcome and thank you for joining us today. Tell us about where this session finds you.
Yay, I am so happy to be here. It is so fun to say happy Friday. Oh, you guys have that Friday feeling. It is Thursday afternoon for me here in Denver. And I was asking when we logged on, I was asking about your weather. And I know maybe some of you are not having a fantastically beautiful day, but I'll put it back in perspective for you because we in Denver, Colorado, we have over a foot of snow out there. So we have I think almost everyone has a snow day today here. So, yep, I am home as I have been for the last 11 months. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here talking about some of my favorite things to talk about. And I'm so happy to have this format where we can just have a dialogue and discussion. So please keep questions coming in the chat box, everyone.
Great. So I know that we often like to start these sorts of conversations with a bit of a baseline, some base knowledge that we can all sort of draw from. So we might first go to Maslow's hierarchy as a framework for this discussion, if that works for you. Here we go.
Perfect.
So would you be able to give us some background on that? Let us know how we might use this when thinking about self-care specifically for educators.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a little bit obsessed with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'll give a little background on why. So this started, I'm going to lean up here. I've got a book up here. So this started with this book, the Motivating and Inspiring Students book that I co-authored with Dr. Robert Marzano and others. And in the book, we used Maslow's hierarchy to think about, this is our approach to social emotional learning for students. We took each of the levels and we started plugging in strategies that we need to think about in order to help stabilize the hierarchy for students. And the whole time we were writing that book, as a practitioner, I just kept thinking, oh man, we absolutely have to think about this for students, but I don't believe that we can think about this for students until we kind of metaphorically walk around to the other side of the pyramid and get the adults in the building solid. And at the time that we were writing this, I was kind of hitting a stage of burnout and, right place, right time. As I'm reading about these strategies and the importance of really taking care of our needs, I just kept thinking, I have a lot of work to do here. And I did a lot of work on myself first and foremost, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. So I used this hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy, in this book, the Take Time for You book, to think about how we approach this from ourselves as the adults in the building first and foremost, because my core belief is that if we have the adults really solid on these levels, oh my gosh, they're coming from such a place where they're just better able to then reach out and help their students with these levels. And so a couple of key reminders that whenever I talk about Maslow, I think it's always interesting to think of the research here. So levels 1 and 2, our physiological and safety needs, are the most essential. In fact, what we know is that if either one of those levels are not solid, we cannot even pay attention. So those are big time. And that includes our physiological needs. I always say it's the 3 doozies. It's diet, sleep, and exercise. And then safety. And if we think about what COVID did for our sense of safety, one way to conceptualize safety is that in order to feel safe, we need 3 things. We need order, predictability, and fairness. And when we think about what happened with COVID and what is still happening, those 3 areas really got rocked, right? So things got definitely out of order. We still lack a sense of true predictability, and none of it feels fair for so many reasons. And so our physiological and safety needs really took a hit. And in a lot of ways, we're still taking a hit. In times of stress or crisis, our diet, sleep, and exercise those habits kind of get all messed up in so many ways. So solidifying those 2 levels first and foremost. And then when we move up to belonging and esteem, so those levels we can attach to engagement, meaning that if our belonging and esteem needs are not solid, we can pay attention, but we will be disengaged to a certain degree. And so those first 4 levels are all about avoiding negative physical or physiological sensations. And when we get those solid, then we have a much better chance of getting to the top. The good stuff is at the self-actualization and connection to something greater than self. Those 2 levels are what we connect to motivation and inspiration. And as educators, we want to ourselves feel motivated and inspired, and we want our students to feel motivated and inspired. So I love having this framework to think about ourselves and our students together, of just as we maneuver through our day and think about utilizing different strategies, just ensuring that we're making sure that these levels are solid. We've all heard this over and over again, the idea of Maslow before Bloom, right? The idea that Maslow, this hierarchy needs to be really solid before we can get into the kind of deeper level learning pieces of Bloom. And they go hand in hand. So not only do we think about the social emotional learning and, academic content learning for students going hand in hand, it's really thinking about our own professional wellness in order to help the social emotional learning of students. So this is how I spend most of my day thinking about Maslow's hierarchy and thinking about it for myself, thinking about how we translate this, what this means for students, what does this mean from a systems perspective. It's just a really good kind of foundation to stand on.
That is such a great place to start. And we really can't, as you've said, we really can't do anything without it. That's where we've got to be really, really, really solid. Otherwise, we just can't move on. We can't do all those extra things that we want to do. We can't change the lives in the way that we want to. We might, so just if anybody has any questions, jump in, throw them in the chat. In the meantime, we might start to look towards teacher wellbeing and self-care in term 1 specifically. So I am just going to stop sharing my screen so we can all just look at each other. So we're back in the classroom face-to-face now, here in Australia most of the time. How can we take our experiences from remote learning from last year and really use them to keep us motivated and healthy in the beginning of 2021, and then maybe as we just keep powering forward in the face of that bit of uncertainty?
Yeah. Oh, first of all, happy new school year. And oh man, what a school year. Last year and this year, like the light is starting to shine, but at the end of the tunnel, but we're still in it. So I'm going to start with thinking about our own wellness. So my recommendation is always, particularly term one, when we're getting things started, that's a reminder to go back to basics. And what I mean by basics is really level one of Maslow. Get your diet and sleep and exercise as solid as possible. I always like to say, treat yourself like a puppy. Like, think about, what do puppies need? Puppies need walks, and they need love, and they need water, and they need to eat meals at certain times of the day, and they need lots of sleep and rest and playtime to keep that mentality. Because I know, when we get a new school year started, I use this term in the book, 180 Days of Self-Care. I call that first season, the first term, the season of sacrifice, because getting a new school year underway it's a sacrifice in a lot of ways, because so much time devoted, particularly this year, as you're back in classrooms, for the most part, back to face, but I know that you have to be prepared to turn on a dime. We've got challenges that we've just never had before. So to me, the best way to face challenges, to face the unpredictability, the truth of the matter, if we learned some big lessons with COVID, is that things can change at any time in the most unexpected ways. And so one of the ways that we can face those challenges, because we will continue to have them, who knows what they will be, the more solid we are in our own good habits and our own routines and our own, just those basic physiological needs, which does not mean that there's no time for treats or any of that. But when I talk about self-care, that's what I mean, like the truest form of caring for ourselves, which can mean like making those hard decisions sometimes, going to bed, drinking the stupid water, right? Making sure that we are taking care of ourselves in all those essential ways. Setting good habits now at the start of the year, that we are going to stop and we're going to eat lunch, that we are going to check in with each other, that maybe we start a new routine this year, that with a colleague, we're going to go take a quick walk, right, on our lunch break, just one lap around the school, that we want to start implementing some new healthy habits. When we think about, because really diet, sleep, and exercise are about habits. And when we think about habit change, one of the recommendations in a lot of books around habit change is when you've got a clean slate. And in a lot of ways, the start of a new school year is kind of a clean slate. So it's ripe for opportunities to try some new habits, getting rid of habits that didn't work for us, starting some new habits, and thinking through the lens of, if we as adults start thinking of that, students will react to that as well. We know our emotions are contagious. And when we feel better, oh my gosh, we just act different. We act better. Students respond to that. So it's kind of that chain reaction piece. So as we think about heading into the new school year, I would say, really just think about how can we get good habits in place that will carry us for the rest of the year.
That sounds completely essential. Thank you. Thank you for that really thoughtful response. And we know that also term one can be the easiest time to be positive in the classroom and to be sparkly and be the best we can be. So you've got the new energy for your new year, for your new students. How can you really hold on to that and keep that going? It's kind of a feat of endurance. Do you have any tips for that?
It is. So I think about us here in the States, we're in kind of the slog of, we're starting to get towards the end of the school year, but this end of the school year feels really far away. And so the recommendations that I've been giving here, as I talk about this with educators here, is that, again, that going back to the basics piece, and I think that there needs to be a little bit of grace of knowing that we will kind of go up and down. right? So I like to think about the school year having 4 seasons. A calendar year has 4 seasons, but I think a school year has 4 seasons. And so, yes, as we start the new term and we're thinking about the season of sacrifice, and that's where we're excited and we're ready to go. And then invariably what happens is we move into what I call is that survival, that just where things are really hard. It's kind of survival mixed into disillusionment, because where we were kind of relying on willpower and getting through when we were all excited, when the excitement wears off and the true behaviors start to shine and things get hard and we get tired, then we're in a different season. And for there, number one, I still say make sure that we've got those core essentials in place. But this is where then I recommend a few different strategies, teeny tiny little things that can help us feel better. My two go-to strategies are gratitude and altruism. There's a ton of research that says if we can get those practices, make these daily habits and rituals, it will help us feel better. Gratitude, first and foremost, we know that our brains cannot hold on to negative thinking and gratitude at the same time. So something we might consider is every single morning, writing down 5 unique things that you're grateful for within the past 24 hours. Maybe on your way to work, you're thinking about things that you're grateful for to get yourself in that positive mind space before you enter into the classroom. The other one, altruism. We know the positive psychology research says that the fastest way to feel better is to do something nice for someone else. And I love that, because you make someone else's day, but in reality, we're helping ourselves. And as educators, we have altruistic jobs. So we get that when we can stay in tune. To me, that's a lot about kind of staying in touch with our why is helpful. And then those teeny tiny little things. If we go on a mission to make sure that we do 5 acts of kindness during the school day, huge. Incorporating this with students can help, raise the spirits of all of us. Maybe we do a 30-day gratitude challenge, and then we do a 30-day acts of kindness challenge. Those strategies, I think, are really helpful when things get hard. This is what I do in the 180 Days book. I really try to match strategies to the time of year. As then we move into then usually kind of after our mid-year break, when we come back, we get into this place of where we kind of find balance and we're moving along. Those would be a different set of strategies. And then for the end of the school year. And I think that there's something appealing about we keep the core foundation. You'll hear me say diet, sleep, and exercise the whole time, right? But then there's these, just if we can play with these different strategies at different times, and they can kind of move in and out. Like as we go through the different seasons of the school year, I think in life we go through different seasons as well. I think that new teachers experience the school year differently than experienced teachers. I think if you've got young kids at home, you're going through a different season of your life than if you're moving and you're empty nesters. So having as many strategies in our tool belt that we can pick up and use at different times, I think really can be a helpful way to thoughtfully maneuver the school year when the as you said, the shine and the appeal of the new start kind of starts to slip away.
Thank you. Thank you for that really generous response. I've got a question from our attendees, actually. So Betty has just asked, what if somebody chooses not to be truthful to themselves in daily habits, for example? So it sounds like it's really a question about self-understanding. How do you see that? How do you see sort of moving through that?
Ask me again. So... I want to make sure I understand it.
Sure. So it's how do we sort of deal with someone, say even ourselves, if we're not really being truthful to ourselves with instilling those habits? So maybe it's a case of saying, well, I won't do it today because it feels really hard today. I see this question as almost being about a question that's got to do with not quite going with the true meaning of self-care. So doing what feels right in the moment as opposed to the difficult self-care. How do you see that? That's what I'm hearing
too. Yes. So this is something that it's always an interesting conversation, because sometimes people, people hear that I talk about self-care and they're like, oh, yes. And then when they start listening, they're like, oh, no. So here's how I say there's two different types of self-care, and I love both of them. There's number one, the feel good self-care. And this is what we're starting to see more and more, like on social media and advertising. I sometimes call this consumable self-care. People try to sell it to us. This is the feel good. Like, this is the wine tasting, eat dessert first, stay up late, go on vacation. And listen, I am here for all of yes, we need that. But at the end of the day, that is not the self-care that's going to help us show up for work tomorrow. And that we can't rely on that. That is so few and far between for the most part, right? When we are committed to our jobs, right? The vacation doesn't happen often enough. We can't do the wine tasting every night, right? So those are like those peaks that we really look forward to. The other type of self-care, the self-care that I talk about is, again, it's kind of the hard self-care. It's making the hard choice. And we can and I have been there so many times, you guys, like it's the dilemma in our head. It's like when we think about the angel and the devil on our shoulder, you can think of it as like the two different types of self-care. So number one, I can sit and watch something on Netflix, right? The Queen's Gambit. I just recently binged The Queen's Gambit, loved it, where I could tell myself in the name of self-care, I'm just going to sit here and watch every episode and eat my popcorn and yes, which is good for a little while. But then at some point, the other side of self-care is to say, yes, and you need to go to work tomorrow. So the true form of self-care is, yes, watch an episode, but then you're going to get up and you're going to put yourself to bed so that you can be your very best self tomorrow. So it is a constant battle and a constant struggle. I still struggle with this. And again, it's not to say that we don't engage in the feel-good self-care, but sometimes we can find these loopholes. I know I can. We'll eat something or do something in the name of self-care, but if we listen closely, we always know if that's really the kind of self-care that will help us or not. So we stumble a lot, and I firmly believe in walking my talk on this, and I still fall down and pick myself up again and do all of that dance. So it is about being truthful with ourselves, taking a really hard look at our habits and deciding, where are celebrations and where would it make a difference to start making some small changes? And I'm a big believer in teeny tiny small changes. The book that I cannot recommend enough. So habits are having their day right now. There's a ton of books on habits. I think I've read all of them. The one that I recommend the most is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And I've also heard it's phenomenal on Audible. What I love is his premise is the idea of getting 1% better every day. 1%. I can do 1%. Like 1% doesn't mean that we're going to go from drinking no water to drinking a gallon of water. 1% says, can I drink a glass of water? And if we do that every day, we start to chip away. And the beauty of that is if we do it every day, we start to feel better. And to me, we can sustain habits when we feel better. The minute we start to feel better and we get traction, it's so much easier to keep going. So that was a long-winded response to just say that I absolutely get that. And there's an idea of really taking a solid look at our own habits. In fact, in the book, Take Time for You, I have a survey at the very beginning that goes through Maslow's hierarchy. And I ask some specific questions where the idea is take the survey at the start of the book. The book takes you through different things that you can do to solidify each level, play around with it, and then revisit the survey at the end of the book to see where we can make some celebrations. Yeah.
Thank you, Tina.
Mm-hmm.
Moving more towards teach wellbeing and self-care throughout the years, so sort of in that same sort of vein, we've got a wellbeing leader who is asking for some whole staff ideas, so some suggestions to use not just during the most difficult lockdown periods, but at any time. So this is from Dipna in Victoria.
Yes.
Have you got any
I
ideas?
do, yes.
Of course.
So the recommendation for that would be this book. So the 180 Days of
Mm-hmm.
Self-Care. So because this book is designed for exactly that. It can be used by individuals. It's so powerful. I love it. Makes my heart so happy when I see an entire staff do this together. And the work is done for you, which is because you guys are busy. Like, I wanted to help. So it's literally taking the 4 seasons of the school year, so 180 days. So each week is a different theme. And so you can present the theme to the staff, set up and then I give you invitations of things that you can try. So for example, the very first week, the theme is music, the power of music. And so thinking about introducing that to your staff via a newsletter or in an email or at a staff meeting, like, this is the theme for the week. I always give the research so you can say, here's why music is helpful. And then here's invitations to get started. And of course, staff could also come up with others. So maybe you try playing music, having a dance party before school. Maybe you have each teacher submit their favorite song and you can create a giant playlist that you can utilize for the rest of the year. Maybe you have challenges of how teachers can use music with their students or play music during passing period or have lunchroom karaoke. And so it's laid out to do exactly, they're all purposeful, super simple, no cost. None of them cost any money. You can do them all totally for free and they take very little time. And that's a way to just keep putting the professional wellness at the forefront. And what's fun about it is, as a staff, everyone can try it, but then you get to decide if it works for you personally or not. I think that there's something as appealing to say that strategy doesn't work for me, instead of just we keep trying to add more things. And so this is about try it for a week. And if you like it, keep going. And if not, you let it go. And next week, we're going to pick up another strategy and try that one. So it's totally laid out to be used in exactly that same way. So I've seen leaders lead a staff through it. I've seen a lot of schools now are having wellness committees. And I love wellness committees. Like, that is the perfect resource for a committee to really lead a staff through. Or instructional coaches, anyone that kind of does the staff newsletter. Oftentimes they've added kind of a corner of the newsletter devoted to, here's our professional wellness challenge for the week. So I love that. I love that question.
Great. It sounds like really just giving the opportunity to staff to really explore what works for them. And that could be working through the book all together, holding on to things that serve them, letting go of things that do not. That sounds like a great way to approach it. I really hope that helped. We've also got a question from a new teacher. So this individual says, I'm a new teacher. I've just entered my second full year of teaching. What have I gotten myself into? What if I feel like I haven't chosen the right path for me?
Yes,
how do you respond to that? That's such a hard question.
So I'm sending the safest virtual bear hug to this teacher because I get it. So for that, number one, holy cow, you can't, if this is for everyone, you can't judge your ability to do your job on last year and the start of this year, while we're still in a pandemic, right? I think it's hard enough to be a new teacher, let alone with how you entered into teaching. I know this doesn't help now, but I keep reminding new teachers, I can't wait until like 10 years from now. And you, new teacher, are in your 10th year and you're working with a new teacher and they think it's hard and you get to say, you think it's hard? Do you remember the pandemic? That was my first year of teaching. Thank you very much. And I survived, right? So you're going to get through it. What I'm going to talk about would come from the Beginning Teachers Field Guide book. So in this book, what I utilize for this is Ellen Moore's incredible work out of the New Teacher Center, where she shows that kind of dip chart, which in a nutshell is just, these are the phases that we go through, particularly as new teachers, where we start in anticipation, right? We're all excited. And then things get really hard, really hard. And as new teachers, there's a fear and a panic there of what have I gotten myself into, because we don't know any different. It does get better. Now, last year made us, right? We kind of went up and down and up and down. So number one, I want you to know that it's totally normal. It's absolutely normal. I would say that we sometimes think that the second year will be better, magically better than the first year, and it's not. It's just as hard. And I don't say that to scare you. I just say that that is the absolute truth. And I think every experienced veteran teacher would say the same thing. And you'll get through it. I think it goes back to grace. I think that is just mandatory that you really think about taking care of yourself, because this is a profession where we can burn out. I mean, burnout is a very real thing. Compassion fatigue is a very real thing. So we have to be very careful about setting really healthy boundaries, about absolute full commitment to students, but making sure that we're taking care of ourselves through that. I would say don't go through it alone. Reach out. I think every new teacher needs a mentor, whether it's a formal mentor that's been assigned or just someone that you trust in your building, that you can ask that exact same question to that person too, and really be able to lean on their advice and kind of walk through that together. So we're so happy. This is speaking directly to you, the new teacher. We're so happy you're here. It will get better. And what you're feeling is normal. I think that that's what we do oftentimes. This education can be isolating in a lot of ways, particularly with the challenges that we're in. And so it's easy for us to feel like everyone else seems to have it together. Everyone's figured this out. I mean, look at social media. Everyone is just crushing it. And we do this, we can really get in that just negative thinking place in our minds. So it's that recognition that it's totally normal. You're going to be fine. It's going to get better. I promise.
It's just a big virtual hug. Thank you.
Right?
So
I
much.
mean, just the biggest. Yes.
Hang in there, new teacher. You're doing such important work, and we are so grateful for you. So thank you. And thank you for being so vulnerable to share that as well. That must have been really hard. We've also had a couple of questions come in through the chat about what leaders can do when it comes to helping staff members through self-care, but about supporting our well-being in the classroom specifically. So I've got a question from Graham. We have young staff who believe that leadership they're responsible for their well-being, and they spend a lot of time supporting staff and working on well-being and mindfulness. He's asking, how do we work with staff to help them discover that well-being responsibility is a joint responsibility and not just something that leadership needs to come in and sort of fix? How do you help younger staff take that on themselves?
Yes. Oh, that's such a good question. Because I absolutely agree. I think it was Graham. I absolutely agree with that. Yes. So a couple of things. So number one, it kind of goes back to the idea of that collective efficacy piece, that John Hattie talks about, that we're better together. I think the same is true when it comes to professional wellness, and that it is certainly not solely the responsibility of leaders, just like nothing is. It's all of us working together. What I love is that when leaders create a space and environment where we can talk about self-care and we can work on self-care, that's the greatest gift ever. Number two, when leaders can model it, because my heart goes out to leaders. My heart goes out to every group. Every time I'm like, oh, new teachers. And then I'm like, oh, teachers. And then leaders, because everyone is they're incredibly challenging jobs for a variety of reasons. And leaders, one thing that I know specifically about the leaders that I work with oftentimes is you're very concerned about supporting your teachers' well-being, which I applaud. And I'm always asking, how are you supporting your own well-being? Which is such a hard question. It's kind of like, teachers in the classroom caring so much about students. And it's always like, and how are you caring for yourself? We've all got that kind of compassion piece. So I recommend leaders modeling it, and then really shifting to that sense of that collective efficacy. In fact, I am on a new endeavor through Solution Tree and my colleague Tim Kanold, where we are in the process right now as we speak of developing a professional wellness framework that can be used with schools to be approached individual teachers, teams of teachers, and leaders helping to guide a school through this, where we're kind of identifying what we're calling 5 dimensions of thinking about professional wellness: physical, emotional, mental, social, and spiritual. And with getting to the place of how cool would it be if schools not only created student achievement goals, but they also created a professional well-being goal for themselves, right? That then as a school, we can help support that, just as we're going to support you as you work on developing your expertise and engaging in deliberate practice around instruction. So kind of melding the two together. So that's something that we are working on right now that should be coming out soon. But it will definitely speak to that. And what it does when we get a framework, I think it's so nice. What we're hearing from everyone is we need this framework, and that kind of makes sure that it doesn't just rest on one person's shoulders, that we have an individual responsibility. We believe we have a team responsibility, particularly through a professional learning community lens, right? As we work together to support each other. And then thinking systems wide, how do we create systems that help support collectively the adults just as much as we're supporting the students? So that's a great question.
Thank you so much, Graham. That is obviously a really, really difficult topic to obviously be living through and having to sort and answer. So thank you so much for helping us and letting us consider that. We've also got a question, how can leadership support wellbeing in the classroom? So we've covered this a little bit in terms of what the 180 days can do, and really coming to teachers wherever they might be and moving through. Do you have anything you might be able to add to that in terms of something that leadership specifically can do? I'm even interested to hear what different types of leaders to do. So maybe a peer leader as opposed to a principal type leader. What do you think?
Yeah. So again, I go back to, and I think if we're thinking specifically in the classroom, to me, now we start thinking of a lens of how we meld together social emotional learning for students and for the adults. And that's what I love about using Maslow's hierarchy to think through that lens, because every strategy that we either associated in the Motivating and Inspiring Students book or Take Time for You that works for adults and students, they actually work for both. So here's a couple of just small examples. So level 1, our physiological needs, diet, sleep, and exercise. An example in the classroom would be utilizing brain breaks, like physical movement brain breaks with students, and which is really good for their physical health. We know the part of the brain that processes movement is the same part of the brain that processes learning. And the easy piece to add to that is for the reminder for teachers to do that brain break alongside students, right? So those together, making sure that students are drinking water, right? We know if students get dehydrated, it's just harder to learn. So ensuring that students are drinking enough water, they have access to water bottles, water breaks, and that as teachers, we're doing the same. So, and then, we can keep, that's just the physiological needs. As we think through the strategies associated with each level, what I love is, rather than just thinking how I can provide this for my students, it's how can I provide this for us as a community together, and thinking through and helping students connect with, when we are purposeful about these levels, how we feel better. How are we ensuring that each and every student has that sense of belonging? How are we checking in to make sure that every student feels connected to at least one other student and one other adult which also means how do we make sure every teacher feels connected, particularly welcoming in new teachers? We really want to ensure that sense of belonging in order to retain new teachers. So that's what I love about just all these different layers that we have, knowing they don't have to sit in separate pockets. We don't talk about just student piece here. We don't talk about just new teachers here and then veteran teachers here, that really we can use the same framework and kind of pull all those pieces together, which can be so helpful. We all know that feeling where it feels like we've got the new shiny strategy thing that we're trying, and it feels like our plates are overflowing. We've got platters overflowing, that when we just kind of take a deep breath and get back to the core and recognize that the strategies work for, it's just a slight variation when we think about working with students versus working with the adults in the building. But if we have that solid common framework, that can be a helpful place to start.
Great, thank you. Betty's also asked a question. It's sort of a suggestion kind of question. Would a tiered approach to supporting staff potentially work? So we've got universal strategies for all, some small group focuses where skills might be learnt, individual support through intervention in extreme sort of areas, coaching, settings, goals, that sort of thing.
I love that. Yes. In fact, that's a lot of what, when I mentioned this endeavor that I'm working on with Tim Canold as we think about developing the new professional wellness center, that's a lot of it. Yes, I love that. And again, it goes back to that same idea. We know that approach works for students, right? That tiered approach. We can think of that tiered approach as well. Yes. Which is, so it would kind of be in, the 180 days, this book, that would be that level 1 universal. Let's introduce it all. Let's just as a staff play with these, because these are what I call self-care hacks. They're just teeny tiny little moments of happiness and joy and things that we can try, these small little things to play with. But then as we start moving into, if we really spend some time doing some self-reflection, setting some goals around professional wellness, that's where we can start to kind of differentiate and pair some people up. So as I mentioned, as we're creating this framework around these 5 dimensions, we would have an assessment that would be part of it. So an individual assessment where we can really celebrate. I don't want to skip over the celebration. That's such an important part. Like, yes, I've got this down. Like, I have figured this part out, like those celebrations. But then where are places that we feel like, of those 5 dimensions, I could, here's a couple areas that feel like need attention, and then pairing some people up, because in the book, we obviously then would provide within the dimensions, we have recommended routines for each of those. So if this group decides that their physical wellness is an area that they want to work on, let's start pulling folks together. And then we can get really thoughtful around, just like we would do with students, right? We can get really thoughtful around who are the staff members that feel like they're shining in that area. That's an area of celebration. Maybe we could match up. And again, what we're doing there is providing even more targeted support. And that, again, that kind of sense of that collective efficacy around professional wellness, I think so powerful. Yes, totally agree. I love that. I love that, Betty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betty. It was good to be able to talk those through all together. So if you've got any more questions, please just drop them in, because we're going to start sort of wrapping up in just a second. I'm also wondering, what do we do when things just aren't going right? When say you've had goals, or you've had not failures, but just things that aren't working out, things that you've tried. How do you deal with that failure? How do you take those steps of self-compassion to be able to pick yourself up and keep going? How do you see that working as a teacher in an educational context?
Oh my gosh, we've all been there, right? Oh, so that, to me, that's kind of talking about, when we think about Maslow, that's really hitting on that esteem level, right? Mm-hmm. Kristen Neff Oh my gosh, has incredible work around this, around self-compassion. In fact, and her last name is spelled Neff. She has, on her website, she has a free self-compassion assessment that you can take. That really is it just helps you start thinking about your own self-compassion and then what to do, and some really fantastic follow-up to that. So when we've hit that place where we just feel like we failed and it's not working, and I've tried this and I keep getting stuck in the same places, and we've all been there, and we rely on willpower and we're going to change our lives starting on Monday, and by Wednesday we've all been there 1,000 times. And so much of that goes back to that self-compassion. The recognition of we're not alone, that it's not just us, moving away from that feeling of isolation, because isolation can be a really scary place to be. So recognizing every single one of us knows this experience, that thinking about that voice inside our head, ensuring that we are talking to ourselves like we would talk to a friend. So the question I always say, when people come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, I failed again at whatever, and they start, I can't believe I'm so stupid, I can't do this. And it's the stop. And the question is, if your best friend came to you in this place, what would you say to your best friend? And start saying it to yourself of, it's okay. We're going to pick ourselves up, right? Tomorrow is a new day. What's a teeny tiny little baby step we can take, right? So it's kind of changing the script in our mind, which is hard work. I wish it was like snap your fingers and everything's better, but it's really important work. And I think that once we start kind of getting to some of those deeper layers, that's where the really powerful transformations come into play.
Thank you. Got one last question.
Yeah.
It's what is the most challenging thing with self-care? What's that biggest hurdle? Just a really easy, quick question, right? To finish off with.
Such a good question. To me, it goes back to that idea of the, when we talk about the two different kinds of self-care, the feel-good self-care, that's easy, right? So the hard self-care, like the most challenging thing, is making choices that help us fulfill our truest selves, right? So it's kind of when we go to do something, if we can get in the habit of pausing and thinking, does this match who I want to be, right? Does this match who I'm trying to become? Does this match my goals in this area? And it's the pause is the hard part, right? The when we get the desire to do something or not do something, how do we push ourselves to have that moment of pause so that we can respond rather than react? I think there's a huge, if we get triggered or something happens, if we're able to take a mindful moment of just to take a beat so that we can respond rather than we react. And the more we do that, the easier it becomes. I don't know that it ever becomes easy, but I think it gets easier because we're just kind of changing those pathways in our brain. We're trying to kind of make new ruts in the road, if you will, to choose a different path. And it's slow and steady. And the journey, the journey never like we start here and then boom, we get to here to this great place. The journey goes like this and up and down. And we just keep going and trying different things and treating ourselves with so much grace and just that self-kindness piece.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all of your wonderful questions, everyone. They were big questions, they were difficult questions, but I think they're things that we've all been carrying around for a while. So it's good to be able to really find out what we can do with that curiosity and maybe steps forward that we can be taking. And I'm just going to share my screen again. Sorry for being slow on this, everyone.
Oh, we all know. You can never find, right? You can never find. Right.
Where's the button? So thank you, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today, Tina. Tina's provided us with these contact details here. So do take a screenshot, note these down, however you like to work, and do follow her on Facebook. She's got a really great content, video posting, sharing regime that puts all of us to shame. And as Tina mentioned at the start, she also does have the Self-Care for Educators podcast. Do find that. I personally have been catching up on that recently, and I found them really short, really sweet, really helpful listens. So jump on if you've got 4 to 9 minutes. You'll really benefit from it.
That's my commitment. They're under 10 minutes. Yes.
They're so quick, but you get so much for them. So do check it out. And here are some of Tina's wonderful resources. They're all available from hbe.com.au. There are the 3 key books there, along with 2 online PD options. One is Global PD, which is an online learning platform that contains over 700 videos, books, study guides, reproducibles, mini courses, and more. So Tina has a playlist and a mini course on there. If you want to find out more, a 14-day free trial is available, which is excellent. Just do bear in mind that while Tina's playlist is available in that trial, the mini course is not, but you will get to have a look at everything that is available there, see what's on offer, see what suits you, see what's going to help. The other is a brand new product that was launched just this week. It's the Thinking and Learning Direct Impact Sessions. So these are 75-minute sessions that are delivered directly to your device of choice. These sessions deliver all the insights, inspiration, and practical strategies of in-person PD at a fraction of the cost and with much more flexibility. Tina's session touches on some of the issues that we've discussed today and is specifically focused on how leaders, coaches, and mentors can support beginning teachers to succeed. And I do know that that is something that a lot of you are quite interested in, just from some of the questions that we saw come through. So that might really be helpful for you. You can find this and so much more at hbe.com.au/wellbeing, hbe.com.au/wellbeing, and we will send out the links to you via email. So if you didn't get to note any of it down, no troubles, you'll get it in a second anyway. So thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We know it's not always easy to take time out of your day. You're very busy and we so appreciate you being here. The recording for this session will be available in the next couple of weeks, so watch out for an email about that. It'll be in your inbox soon, and you'll be able to rewatch or share that with others. Anybody who didn't make it today will be able to catch up, and you'll be able to share it with people you feel might also benefit. So other than that, thank you so much, Tina. Thank you so much for joining us today, for giving us your wonderful insights. We wish everyone a fantastic day, a fantastic weekend. Take the time to recharge and back into it next week.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.